everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. This week I am going to be finishing up my Katrina van Tassel Sleepy Hollow stripy dress, which you can see right here on the dress form. So if you have not already seen the previous parts of this project, I have done two other videos so far, one on making the petticoat and then the other on making all of the dress part. But as you can probably tell by looking at this, the dress is not quite finished yet. So there are a few main things that I'm going to be doing in this video to finish the dress in time for Halloween and festivities the weekend prior to Halloween. I know that by the time you're watching this, Halloween is over, but that's what happens when your sewing videos are about a week delayed behind the actual time. So to begin with, I think the first thing that I'm going to do is the stomacher. Now I have already created a pattern for this within my mock-up, so if you wanted to see how I did that, definitely go check out the last video. I will link both the previous videos down below in the description. But I am going to be making the mock-up out of the one layer of the outer stripy fabric, and then I think I'm actually going to do probably 2 layers of a backing fabric. Honestly, it's just going to be the same as the rest of the bodice. It's going to be twill. And the reason that I'm doing 2 layers of it is because I have this feeling like I might want boning in it. I don't generally tend to put boning in the stomachers that I make, but I'm used to stomachers that are like this shape as opposed to this shape. And I just have kind of a concern that with it being kind of so large, because it'll come down into a point here, I worry that it won't quite stay in place without having any boning in it. So I think I'm going to do a couple of boning channels, and I will make those in the cotton twill before applying the stripy fabric to the outer so that you can't see any of it from the outer part of the stomacher. And then my plan is to actually sew it in place on one side, kind of like I did with my pastoral gown, and then the other side I will have some sort of closure that hides it. My guess is hooks, because I tend to prefer that. I tend to not prefer pins, so my thought is I'll probably have a few hooks that kind of hold down this one side onto the stomacher here, and then the bodice itself will hook together right at the top. So yeah, that's my plans for the stomacher. And then I'm going to be working on the sleeves. I am planning to just use the Amalia Scroop pattern for my sleeves because I happen to have them right here, and I used this like 2 years ago, I think. So I'm gonna make this a little longer, but I don't think it should be that different. I think that these should still work as decent 18th century sleeves, and I am going to be attempting to make that really neat chevron look in putting the sleeves together. So hopefully I can actually get that to come together. That's definitely going to be difficult. And following that, I think the only other things that I have to do are I do have to put in some sort of a tape situation underneath the back skirts of the gown so that they can be pulled up and like bustled up or polonized. And then of course I have to do the trim. So that is going to involve a run to Joann's for some black lace, which hopefully I can find a decent black lace that'll work at Joann's. And then I will also be making the rest of the trims out of fabric, both out of probably some silk organza, just because I have a lot of it, and I think that's what they use to kind of get that frayed sheer effect that you can see right here, and then also the stripy fabric itself. So that's a lot to do. I only have about 4 evenings, I think, to get all of this accomplished this week, so wish me luck, and I'm gonna get started. Okay, so a couple of things. As you can see, I have the mock-up sleeve sewn in here. I did actually make this hopefully long enough to be long sleeve. Hers is like a weird bracelet length, which honestly I don't really like, so I think I'm gonna do mine long. But as you can see up here, it's like super gathered. Now this pattern calls for, I think, a few pleats in there. I had those in there initially, but it actually wasn't enough to take out how much sleeve there was to fit it into this arm size. So I undid the pleats and then just gathered the whole thing. But honestly, I'm almost positive that I'm gonna have to take some of this out because her sleeve is not like a puffed sleeve. It's hard to tell honestly from the tiny clip that it's in, but I think her sleeve is fitted and then has a couple of pleats in the back, which is pretty standard for 18th century sleeves, where you get a few pleats like kind of right here going into the back of the shoulder. So that is what I'd like to do, which is why this is probably not going to work. But I wanted to go ahead and give it a try on the whole sleeve and see how it goes. And then let's talk about the construction that I've done to test out this stomacher, because this is kind of a like prototype, if you will. So basically what I have here, there's 3 layers, 2 of twill and then 1 of the black and white stripe. And I put them together so that I did this seam first, right sides together, and then turned it. And then I went and I did some boning channels. So there are 4 boning channels currently in here, 2 in the center, and then 1 just a little bit over on each side over here. Now that side, because I went and I sewed this bit first, I couldn't actually quite get all the way in. So the boning channels right now, the stitching stops here, and then these pink lines, if this works, there are bones in here right now. If this works, I will stitch those by hand, making sure to catch only those and not the exterior. But there was just no way to get this little bit into the machine. And then I just went and I basted this in place so that the layers would stay together. And I did it in a color where I can see it from the exterior, because this is where the jacket should close to. So that should be the edges. And then I will be able to like finish those edges once I go in and fix the point and stuff, if this works. I don't know that this is going to work. I honestly don't even know that I need the boning in there. So we're just going to kind of play with all of that and see what happens. All right, so as you can see, I have it on. The first thing that we are going to be testing, obviously, is the sleeve, not the stomacher, because I don't have that on. And luckily, the sleeve is a little too big around in the upper arm as well. So what that means is that I can take out of the arm itself and therefore also reduce the gathering up in the top. It has a nice fit. Love the length. I think I'm going to stick with this length and not go with the awkward bracelet length sleeves, because honestly, like her sleeves in the movie, I think are about here, and that's weird. That's not a thing from the 18th century. Like, they would have sleeves here, they would have sleeves here. I've never seen otherwise a bracelet length sleeve, and it just makes it look like it's too short. And considering I am tall and have lived my entire life dealing with too short sleeves, I'm gonna go with the long sleeve, because also it's supposed to be cold on Sunday. So let's take care of that worry as well. So yeah, I'm gonna go with the long, but I do want to take it in. And honestly, I think I want to take it in down here too, because as you can see, it's just got a little bit of extra down here from what would generally be a fitted sleeve towards the end of the 18th century. They were quite fitted to the arm. They were like, not skin tight, obviously, because you got to be able to move, but they were definitely more fitted than this. I could probably take an inch out. I don't know if I'm going to go that far. I might start with about 3/4 of an inch down here, and up here it's probably even a little bit more. But other than that, I think the sleeve is set in a good angle. Like, we're not getting weird wrinkles when my arm is like this. I think the angle of the sleeve is good. So it's just a little bit big, and it's just a little bit too gathered up here. So let me go ahead and fix that right now, and we'll see what it looks like in a moment. All right, so I took an inch out of the sleeve in the upper portion, and at around the elbow, like above the elbow, I tapered it out so that I was taking 3/4 of an inch down here. So this area was probably like 7/8 of an inch. And honestly, I think it's a little too tight just in this sort of like upper forearm elbow area. So I do think I need to take a little bit less out of it there. The rest of it I feel like is really quite nice, and it has that now fitted look of 18th century sleeves. I just noticed, like, it's fine if my arm is straight, but when I bend my arm, I feel like it's tight right here. So I think I'll add just a little bit back in there. But the rest of it's pretty darn good. The one other thing that I do need to do though is that I put my pleats in where I had originally had them on the pattern, which was kind of clustered around that seam, but I just feel like it looks very baggy right there. So I want to space the pleats out a little bit. There isn't really, there's like easing, because I didn't take the gathering stitches out, but I took the gathers out of the gathering stitches, if that makes sense. I kind of, you know, moved the fabric so that it really wasn't doing anything more than just easing the head in for the whole rest of the sleeve, and then I put the pleats back in that were supposed to be in there. So yeah, I'm going to space those pleats just a little bit on the shoulder. I'm going to add a little bit back into right here, and then I think I should have a working sleeve. So first off, I have fixed the sleeve, so I like how those pleats are spaced out right there. I've also fixed this area of the sleeve. It feels good now. And also, I pinned the stomacher on. As you can see, I didn't cut off the excess edges, so it is sticking over the top right now, but that's totally fine. And I also don't need that 2 inches because I have this pinned exactly where my line is. Honestly, I might keep that line there. I might change it to a different color just to not risk the light pink showing, but it made things really easy to pin it to. Then again, if I'm putting hooks on this, I don't need to keep the line there, so never mind. I am going to sew one side in place because basically what I did was I pinned it in place on one side before I even put this on, and then I brought it over, met it to the line, and pinned it a few times on the other side here. And yeah, it's working great. Actually, the boning is working really well. I do have to cut down the boning a little bit that is in the center because it is coming up actually past the bodice by about, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch or something like that. But otherwise, I think that's working great, and I love the way that it is keeping everything nice and straight down here at the bottom. So yeah, I'm feeling really excited about things. I think it is time to cut the sleeve out of the stripy fabric. I am actually going to use this once I cut the excess seam allowance off. I am going to use these pieces as the flat lining, so I'm going to cut another one of these two. These are just from cotton sateen sheets, and yeah, I'm excited to where things are going. So I think I can cut off some of the excess of the stomacher and probably just kind of finish the edges and attach it in on the one side. And then, yeah, I think I'm gonna do hooks and bars on the other side. I think that's gonna be best, but I am excited. Everything's kind of coming together. So before I go and separate these sleeves and cut them, what I'm doing right here is I'm kind of drawing on a little bit of a guide for approximately what the angles should look like where they meet. And it's also kind of going to give me like little hash marks of where the pieces should meet. I'm hoping that this is going to be helpful. I don't think there's any real way for me to draw on like completely all of the lines, especially since I want this to be a lining piece anyway, but I think this should be a decent guide. So this is the outer portion of the arm, just so that you can see what I'm looking at. I have all of the pictures up here on my computer so we can see like this really steep angle there, and then on the inner portion of the arm there's a shallower angle. So I have also drawn that angle here in the inner portion, and that is a reverse angle from what's going on out here. I'm hoping that this will all like work out when I actually lay it out. I don't know if it will, but yeah, I think these little bits will be helpful. So as you can see, I'm laying out the first sleeve piece here. I knew that this one right here, I wanted this to line up with the top part of a black line. So that's kind of my anchor point. And then obviously these should be approximately in line with the black lines. Same with this one. And they seem to be pretty decent. So yeah, this is where I can cut for the first piece. Then I will flip this cut piece over and put it like face to face on the other side to cut the other sleeve for this piece. And then comes the hard part, matching up the other piece of the sleeve to cut it out. This is what it looks like laid on top of itself. And obviously it goes without saying, don't do this sort of cutting if you don't have a lot of extra fabric, because this is going to take up like probably about 1.5 yards of fabric just to cut out these 4 sleeve pieces. Okay, so here's the thing. I decided to try and see how the pieces would go together before even attaching the lining or anything like that. I just wanted to see if these stripes would line up. And what I'm faced with here is that sometimes they do line up and sometimes they don't. So I think you can see that it's really quite a bit off there. What you're seeing, this edge right here, that is the stripe from underneath. And same with like over here, it's way off. Here it's closer, but it's still off like a tiny bit. And I'm just kind of trying to figure out why. I think maybe the fabric was slightly warped when I cut it, because really the pieces should line up. So obviously I'm gonna have to recut. This is why I did this before I even cut out all of the pieces. I have 3 of the 4 right now cut out. So yeah, something's gonna have to change. And it's dawned on me, luckily, before I go and recut these pieces, that really what I can do, because the pieces themselves are the same on the sides. They're just different at the top. I can actually go ahead and just get rid of the piece that did not work, that I've only cut one of so far, take these pieces and lay them down on top of the fabric, like cut out a whole other one of these and then just cut down the top of it, because the top part, honestly, that is the part that doesn't matter anyway. It's the seams that matter, and that should give me the perfect matching up if I can match these up literally as I'm cutting them. So as I was cutting the pieces out, I went ahead, pinned and stitched them together, just basted them with the machine. That's why they're inside out, because I, did this literally as I was cutting it. And yeah, it seems to have worked. So I think that is the method that I need to do. It was definitely frustrating because I swear these stripes are different widths. I don't know what was going on. So I'm really hopeful that I can get the same result once I have flatlined these, because that is my plan, is to flatline them with the cotton sateen and then to actually sew them together. But at least the laying them down on top of each other sort of thing does work. I will obviously need to cut one of these sides down so that it can be the underside of the arm instead of the outside. But yeah, this part, that seems to work. The sleeves are assembled, and while the chevrons are not completely perfect, they are pretty darn close, so I think I will take it. And then that is the other sleeve. So yeah, they look pretty nice. Now let's go ahead and pleat those little pleats up and put them on the bodice. You guys, I'm ridiculous. I just spent the last like half hour plus stitching this all in place so neatly that you can't see any of the stitches, and then stitching down this side too with little whip stitches, and then I remembered this is all going to get covered by trim. So let's talk about trim. There are a few areas on this dress that have trim. First, we've got the neckline. Second, we've got the front opening and all the way down the front of the dress. And third, we have the sleeves. And the sleeves are where there's like the most trim, where there's layers of trim. And I basically went through and I analyzed really closely pictures that I will stick up here. And I went and I wrote down what these trims consist of, because honestly, most of them are just made out of fabric, which is great. So let's start with the wrists. On the wrists, okay, these are all of the layers of trim, and I'm going to start with like literally the wrist part and then work my way up the arm. What we're looking at here is, first we have a layer of silk organza, a little ruffle of silk organza with black lace on top. Now her lace is kind of a leaf motif. I got lace at Joann's, so it's not going to be that close. Above that, we have a white ruffle and then a black ruche meaning that there's stitching on both sides, so it's gathered up. Then above the black ruche, there is honestly something that I can't tell if we actually have another ruffle or if we maybe just have a gap, because what I'm looking at here is a little peak of white, and I think that could be maybe another ruche. It's hard to say, but basically what we're looking at is trim that is made out of the striped fabric, so that's why we're having like white, black, white, etc. But above / on top of where we have that white, we also have a black ruffle where we can see there is a white underside, as in it is folded over, like instead of just hem turned up, it's folded over, so the underside of the ruffle is actually white. Then we have white ruche, and then we have black ruffle with white underside. This ruffle sticking upwards up the arm instead. And again, this looks like it could be layered over another ruche. It's kind of hard to tell, but it does look like there is again some white underneath that black with white underside ruffle. And then we have a black ruffle facing upwards. Now this one we don't see any white underside, so I don't know if it has any sort of hem on it at all, or maybe they had the choice with drawing on their stripes that they made this like a double wide and they drew basically what became the underside as well. And then underneath that we have more of the silk organza around the top of the arm. So a lot of trim. And on the dress, it looks like it's really only going part way up the arm. Now remember, she has like a bracelet length sleeve, and then it looks like it's going to maybe about here. So since I did do mine as a long length sleeve and my arms are no doubt longer than Christina Ricci's, mine are probably going to be just slightly off, but also I think my stripes are wider, so that might make up for it. Then if we look at the front opening of the dress, we are looking at another type of ruffle. So first on the outward edge, we have a white ruffle. This does have a white underside as well. Obviously, again, I don't really have an option in that. Mine will have to have a black underside unless I want to literally cut it off and not have a hem, which I don't think I want to do that because this fabric frays. And then on the other side of the white ruffle, we have what could be a black ruche, or honestly, it could be a black ruffle. It's really hard to tell from this picture. And if it is a black ruffle, we do have a white underside, but again, this picture is just not very clear, so it's hard to tell. And then kind of underneath that, there is more of the silk organza ruffle peeking out of the top. The part around the neckline is really, really similar, except that with that silk organza, we are adding the black lace on top of that as well, so we get the organza layered with the black lace. So it's a lot to do. I'm going to wind up cutting like a lot of strips and then doing a lot of gathering stitches basically, and just kind of figuring it out from there. And I think I'm going to cut my strips instead of ripping them just because I want them like so precise. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and start doing that. By the way, the organza strips are all unhemmed and they are left to kind of fray on the edges. So that is my plan. Hopefully it won't fray too far because organza can fray quite a bit. I am thinking about ripping those just so that they stay on the grain, because there's basically no other way to tell that you have silk organza on the grain other than ripping it. So yeah, that's my plan for that. Oh, speaking of lace, let me show you what lace I got. So when I was at Joann's the other day, I actually bought 3 options of lace, but I'm pretty sure I've decided which one I'm going to do. So really, I thought that the prettiest lace was this one right here. I thought that was really pretty. Unfortunately, it only comes on 1 yard spools. My Joann's only had 1 yard, and it is also not gathered. This is gathered lace as far as I can tell from all of the pictures. And when I calculated how much I would need before I left, just the sheer, like, if it was already gathered, I need at least 1.5 yards, and that I think is pushing it. I think it's actually 1 yard. Actually, I think I need 1 2/3 yards. So that really is gathered lace. So I would probably need 3 of these, which means I'd have to go to another Joann's and gather it. And each of these without a coupon, which of course you always have coupons, is $8 per yard. So that's kind of gross. And also I'd have to like hide the joins because it's only 1 yard at a time. So yeah, as much as I like that, I'm going to be returning this. It didn't even occur to me when I bought it that it wasn't gathered. So yeah. And then I bought some that was yardage, which I thought that this was like pretty. It was the only yardage that they had that seemed good. It is already gathered, and I like that it's not very densely gathered. So I got 2 yards of that, but really it's too wide, and I don't think there's any way for me to use this being this wide. I believe this one was like $3 a yard and then take a coupon. So it wasn't too bad. And then this, surprisingly enough, came from where they put the bin of like the really cheapo lace that a lot of times feels really scratchy and stuff. This one does not feel scratchy. Looks like this. It actually looks really pretty, and I love that it's kind of like got these little whisper things at the edge. I feel like that kind of is the mood of the dress. It's a little more densely gathered than I would like. If I get really picky about it, I could always take off the piece that's holding the gathering in place and, you know, do what I want with the rest of the lace. It's a little narrower than the one that was yardage, and this was $3 for 5 yards. So yeah, this is the way to go. I'm not even going to use most of this. Obviously, I only need about 1.33 yards. And $3, like what a good deal. And I had a coupon, so really it was like, I don't know, probably $1.60, $1.75, something like that. So I think overall, I haven't obviously cut the fabric to get the trimming out of it yet, but otherwise I have 5 yards of this left at this moment, which means that I used up 2/3 of like the $65. So right now we're looking at about a $45 project. So yeah, get yourself some of this. Now that said, I did check the bolt yardage of this fabric is currently sold out on Amazon. It's still available per yard, and I think it's $5 a yard. So it's still not bad, not quite as good, but I highly recommend going the pre-striped fabric route, going the budget route. It is working just fine so far, knock on wood. Okay, I lied. I'm ripping the fabric because I realized that I need a whole lot of this, at least for like the bodice front opening. And frankly, the undersides are going to be buried under each other anyway, and you're not going to see them. So now I need like 10 yards of this, I think. Better go rip some more. So just as an example of how these ruffles are going to work, this is the unfolded one that is the lowest on the wrist. On this one, I have already now folded it up. This is the upper part of the arm, and this is the wrist right here. So at the wrist, I have ripped this basically 1.5 stripes away from where the fold line is. And what that will allow me to do is catch this edge underneath here, underneath the ruched bit. So I am going to be doing 3 rows of gathering on here because this part right up here is going to be ruched. This part is also going to be ruched. This part is a ruffle. So we have a row of gathering here, a row of gathering here, and a row of gathering here. And then all of those, I think, on top of the stitching for the gathering are also going to be stitched down in place on the sleeve. We'll have to see if I need all of them, but I think I will. And I've cut most of these to be about 2 times the length of what they need to be applied to. That said, I did all of the arm ones the same length, which is the upper arm. This, honestly, I don't think I need it to be this long. I think I can probably cut a good like chunk off of it like that, but I want to see what it looks like ruched up first before I remove the excess. So something that I'm finding interesting here, and I don't know how much it's really showing on camera, is that this is definitely reading grayer than this because this is somewhat sheer fabric. It is now backed with black, and the black is coming through as kind of a sort of a pale gray as opposed to the stark white of the other stripes. Honestly though, there's nothing that I can really do to get away from this other than flatlining every single stripe piece, which I'm not going to do. It would make it way too bulky and just waste a lot of time and fabric. So we're going to live with the grayness on there. I don't think it's too bad. And especially once I have it like halfway up the sleeve, all the way around the front, around the neckline, etc., I don't think it will look that weird at all. So now that I've done the first one and found the method that works, let me talk you through this. So the first thing that you're going to do for these is you're going to cut it down to whatever length you need. That is going to be 2 times what you are gathering it to plus seam allowance in the end. Then you are going to make your folds. So that's what I've got here. This is number 2 on the wrists, and I've done my folds here. However, now I'm going to open the folds back up. I'm going to serge these edges right here, and I'm going to join them together end to end like that on the sewing machine. Then I can go through and I can run my gathering stitches. The reason that you are doing the end to end first and not the gathering stitches is so that you can gather through this. Because if you were to do the end to end afterwards, you would get like ugly edges, but having it folded out like this and going end to end means that you're going to get a nice clean edge. That's why you do your gathering stitches afterwards. Then you pull up the gathering stitches and you can sew it to your sleeve. So little PSA for you. First off, I have basically all of everything gathered. The long strip was an absolute nightmare to gather because I was trying to put my stitches like kind of close to each side. This isn't the long strip. This is one of the wrist ones. But basically they were like there and it was just a nightmare. Like it literally took me hours, I think, to gather that. I should have just done it by hand. So now what I'm doing is I am ripping strips of the organza, the silk organza, to put with these as well, because I can't really put them on until I have the organza that goes underneath. So I've ripped some strips and I've decided to do a little test with some fray check to see if like that will help any. Sorry, it can't focus on something sheer, but I've just done a test on some scrap here, edging it with fray check. Now, PSA for you, because I did this with it laying on top of my big gridded ruler. And I noticed that I had like some old Sharpie or something like that on the ruler. So I just went to go wipe away the Sharpie so that it wouldn't get on stuff because the glue kind of activated it, made it loose again. And I wiped it away and it wiped away the ruler. What? So apparently there is something in fray check. This is what I'm using here. I don't know what ingredient is doing this, but the fray check then wiped away with just a simple tissue. Look, there's my ruler on the tissue. So that's great. I didn't need those lines at all, you know. I don't need to know where the 9-inch mark is or any of these. Oh my God, I'm glad that I caught this now and didn't try to do a lot more, but like, don't put fray check near your ruler. So not only did the fray check do that weird thing on my ruler, but looking at it, you can see it shining. So I think I'm gonna take my chance and just not fray check this at all. I'm a little bit worried about it because this does tend to want to do this thread thing like that, but it does look like in the movie that hers did not have any sort of thing stopping the fraying from happening. So now that I have all of the organza gathered up, I'm pinning it along the edges of the gown. So neckline, bodice, fronts, and then I will also be pinning the skirt. That said, it's requiring a lot of pins and I don't want things to get out of place. So I'm actually going to sew it on a little bit at a time. So right now I've done the whole bodice and I'm going to go ahead and sew as much as possible by machine. Now that said, I mean, this was the part that I did so nicely by hand on my edge here, and there's a couple of places in here where it does actually go over a bone in the stomacher, like right here. So I'm obviously not gonna be able to sew those by machine. I'll have to skip a little bit and just kind of whip that on by hand later, but it's, you know, about like a centimeter that will need to be done by hand and the rest is by machine. And then over the top of this, the stripey trim will get sewn on also by machine. So now that all of the organza has been sewn on, it is time to put the lace on because I want the lace to be layered underneath and then both of these like edges to be covered over by the stripey trim. So I've just folded back the edge right here. If I have time later, I might stitch that down with a little bit of hand stitching, but I folded it back and I'm going to apply this again with the machine just along the edge like this. And I did space this out first, like I laid it all out just to make sure that everything looked right. And it did look like the scale of putting the stripey trim then layered on top right here. Also with the center of it centered right there, that everything would scale out the correct way here. I don't remember if I mentioned it by the way, but this was ripped to 2 inches wide and this lace trim is just about 1 inch wide. So this gown trim has literally taken an entire day longer than I anticipated. However, all of the trim is now on the bodice edges. Yeah, not the sleeves. I still haven't actually put the trim on the sleeves. And honestly, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get to it for this weekend. My next step is to do the closures on the front now that the trim is on. I couldn't do the closures before or it would have prevented me sewing this on by machine. So yeah, I sewed it all by machine. It's so thick, you guys. I'm a little worried. Like seriously, it is just so thick. But I'm gonna put hooks over here and bars over here, and I might have to safety pin the Polonise part for tomorrow for my Halloween party. Highly, highly doubt that I'm gonna have any sleeve trim on for the Halloween party, but maybe by Sunday afternoon, which, you know, gives me like 2 hours on Sunday to add more stuff basically. Maybe I will be able to finish it by then, but that's what it looks like now. Well, it's a little ill-fitting and crooked on the dress form, but the closures are now on. All the trim is on the dress, like I mentioned. Hi, Lion. And tomorrow I will hopefully have time to Polonise the dress and maybe add a little bit of sleeve trim while I am doing party prep as well. Okay, so let's talk about the Polonise tapes that I'm using in here. So there are 3 sets of tapes, one in the center and then one kind of on each side. And this at the waist is like 3 inches over from where the skirt starts as opposed to the pieces that are cut all in one. And then this bit right here is 8 black stripes from the edge. That's how I was counting these sorts of things. And this is 5 1/4 inches from where it is stitched in. This is 10 inches from where it is stitched in. And what I've done in the center here is I've actually done a little safety pin because I was going to do this with like a little loop sewn in and I don't have any little like metal loops or anything. So I put a safety pin in. You're really not going to see it from the outside because it's kind of in the like underside of where it's tucked up. And I've pinned the tapes where those are as well, and then I'm tying a bow over it. The center tape, the dimensions I think are just slightly off from there, but they're pretty close. This one is the same dimension. I think this bottom tape is just a little bit longer, But yeah, that is how everything is working, and let me show you what that looks like. So on the dress form, that looks like this. I am tempted to put like an additional bustle pad kind of underneath there. It wouldn't be underneath the petticoat since I've already leveled the petticoat, but I do feel like it just wants a little bit more in the back. This is fine for 18th century, honestly, but I feel like her look honestly is a bit more bustle than 18th century, and this could do with a little bit more bum under there. Well, guests are going to be showing up any minute for my Halloween party, but I'm giving you guys kind of like a little sneak look at the actual finished look because it's not finished. So I'm hoping that maybe tomorrow, by the time we visit the cemetery, I will have it finished. As you can see, my sleeves have no trim. The trim is all like together. You've seen the various parts of it come together. I think literally the only other seam or whatever that has to be sewn on it is 2 of the organza ruffles, the ones that'll go up here. They haven't actually been sewn end to end. They've been gathered, just not sewn end to end. And then obviously nothing has been actually put on my arms. And the hard part is, I think pretty much all of that is going to have to be hand sewn because I can't get this around my free arm in my machine. So I'm probably going to wind up like crazy big stitch basting it for the most part and doing like maybe some whip stitches, the ones that are right around the wrist, because you know it's just more movement there. But the others I have a feeling will be basted. Let me talk to you about the wig before anyone shows up. This, if you recognize this wig at all, that's because you've seen this one before. This is actually the wig that I first styled for my Cinderella pink dress a couple of years ago, and then I kind of restyled it for Daniel Deronda. So what's happening here is that these curls are honestly a little tighter than I would want for Katrina, and then these, which were the ones that were like tucked up in the bun, those are a little looser than what I would want. And I think someone's here. So I'm gonna talk to you tomorrow, probably as I finish these sleeves. Bye. So after my party ended, I stayed up much too late and I wound up adding 3 of the layers of trims tonight. So we have the silk organza, the black lace, and then the first one of these. So there will be 2 more others, hopefully, of those, plus 1 more organza at the top. But this basically is sewn on right now here and here. It should also be sewn on here at some point, but that is definitely not going to happen by tomorrow. I did a running back stitch to sew this on. This is whip stitched on, and this bit down here is whip stitched on as well. And Dora would like to say hi. Well, I am leaving 20 minutes late for my event, but look, I got almost every single one on. I'm just missing the silk organza that goes at the very top of the arm, but I'm really liking this layering look of all of the trims. Otherwise, I think it looks pretty much spot on. right, I have just gotten home, so let's talk a little bit about this project as a whole as a wrap up. So, okay, first off, yes, I'm not technically finished with it because I did not get the last row of organza on my sleeves. So I would still like to add that. I mean, I have the strips here. They already have their gathering stitches on them. They just need to be sewn end to end and then whip stitched on. Honestly, if I had had like a half hour more, probably I could have gotten them on, but I was really glad that I got the other layered trims on because I do think, oh, there's a pin in here. I wore a pin. I was wearing a pin in all of those pictures and footage. Didn't know it was on there and nobody else told me. So yeah, anyway, I don't need that. So they are done. Apparently they still have pins in them. When I got in the car to go to the event too, I picked up my dress like this and instantly had to put it down because I apparently had had a pin, a red-headed pin, I might add, in this trim that was there all yesterday during my Halloween party, and no one noticed that, and I never noticed it or stabbed myself yesterday. So hopefully there's not other pins hanging out in this dress, but who knows? But yeah, overall, I am very pleased with it. I think there is one other thing that I might wind up adding, or that at least I would change in the future if I were to make this again, which is I do really think that this part of the skirt, the like dress part of the skirt, could definitely benefit from being lined with something that has more body or more stiffness, more rigidity, something like a cotton organdy, for example, because I just feel like it's a little too droopy back here and I'm not getting the poofiness that I want and that I feel like I should have, because hers was silk in the movie, Silk Taffeta, that has its own body and that is able to stand up like that, whereas this one is not. So that's something that I might go ahead and add in the future, but it's definitely something that I would do differently if I were to make this again. But overall, I'm honestly super happy with how this turned out and how it came together and everything. Honestly, I think it looks just about perfect. I love the dress. It looks and feels, I think, so flattering. It has all of the lines right. I'm glad that I put the boning in the stomacher too. I feel like it looks just so sharp and everything. And yeah, I'm just really, really happy with the overall look of this. It definitely felt fun to wear it to the cemetery, and in the future, I think I would also like to wear this to other places. I can definitely see myself pulling this out every year for Halloween, but then also I'll probably wear it to Comic-Con is kind of my thought. Like come March, I think I'll go ahead and pull this out and wear it, even though it's totally wrong seasonally, but it's just fun. And I really like this wig too. I feel like considering this was just my Cinderella wig and it came out of that, I think it looks really, really good and nice. And yeah, so definitely super happy with this project, and I'm really glad that I threw this extra Halloween project in. And now next week I will be going back to the pumpkin dress that I started a few weeks ago, so make sure you check back for that video next week. But that is going to be it for this video. So if you liked this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon, and if you'd like to see more videos like this from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I do post videos here on YouTube at least once a week, with sewing vlogs like this out on Tuesdays, but sometimes also additional content out on Saturdays. But I post every day over on my Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram. That's at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And if you'd like to help support all of the work that I do on this channel, I do have a link to my Patreon and my Ko-fi down in the description below, or you can send me a super thanks or join my YouTube channel memberships right here on YouTube below the video. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my Edwardian level patrons, Jean and Janelle. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Happy sewing!